Hi, and welcome once again to Devotions with Pastor Joe as we focus around the Lord's Prayer. As we've been talking in the church all this month about prayer, it's great to spend a little bit of time around these prayer essentials that Jesus taught us. He taught us first that we need to come into His presence with thanksgiving. Second, we need to submit to His will. Third, we need to pray for our daily needs. And fourth, we need to ask for our daily forgiveness and forgive others. And fifth, the last thing he says to do is he says, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Now, I've often struggled and read many people writing about that way that Jesus chose to phrase it. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Why would Jesus say that? Is he trying to say that God might lead us into temptation? That God might be doing that? And, well, we better ask him not to lead us into temptation? Now, that's not true at all. And in fact, that's not what Jesus is saying. Jesus is not saying that God could lead us into temptation. In fact, that's impossible for God to lead us into sin, because everything that God does brings out holiness and righteousness. He doesn't do something that ultimately causes harm. But Jesus is telling us something in there that we are led into temptation. We are not, in a sense, the sole control of our lives, even though we would love to pretend to be. The reality and the humbleness that Jesus is teaching us in this prayer is that we are dependent on God to guide us, to steer us away from evil. If He's not at the control in our car, then we are going to end up in the ditch. And so Jesus says, make it a priority prayer of your life that you ask that God keeps you out of evil's way. Do you know that all kinds of sins and temptations and evil plans and desires of this world, they're all around us. We can't escape from them. Some of them are there inside of the sinful humanity that we have, and some of them are in the actions and attitudes of others, the goals and plans of this world, and the spiritual forces and powers that are around us. We are, in a sense, surrounded by influence. And Jesus knows that we are not going to make it through that influence without the help of God. And so he tells us, ask God to steer you away from evil every single time. We are dependent on God. You know, submission is the way by which we get this guidance and help. When we ask for God's protection against evil, we are, in a sense, coming under his cover. And unless we're covered by God, we don't have a safe haven from all of these spiritual, physical, and emotional things that happen in the world. In Psalm 61, he says, hear my cry, O God, listen to my prayer. From the end of the earth I cry to you when my heart is faint. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I. For you have been my refuge, a strong tower against the enemy. Let me dwell in your tent forever. Let me take refuge under the shelter of your wings. Notice that in the psalm here, that David is emphasizing it's the protection of God that deals with the enemy. It's not the power of the person. David doesn't say, give me the authority and power to go out there and squash all kinds of evil. No, David, who has obviously failed many times, recognizes without God's covering and protection, he has no hope against evil. So we're taught again and again to come under God's protection, come under in submission to his will. In James chapter 4, verse 6, he says, God opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble. Submit yourselves therefore to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners. Purify your hearts, you double-minded. You see, what James is saying is it's these influences and attitudes that have pulled us out from submission to God, where we're chasing all of these things. And that's when the temptations get us. In fact, the temptations have pulled us out from under cover. They have taken us to a dangerous place where we can be attacked. So James says, if you want to solve that problem, run under God, submit to him. And then you will find that you have power to rebuke the devil and to push him away, because it's not your authority that's doing it, it's God. So in this submission, it allows our hearts to become wise to the traps, the trials, the temptations around us. Rather than being fooled at our heart level, God protects our hearts so those things never make sense. Number two, it gives us authority over the devil so that we don't end up having to do his will. And then third, it keeps us protected. So as you pray these prayers this week, and as you are thinking about this today, why don't you ask God submit to him and ask him to protect you from the evil influences around you so that you always walk in that good green place that God plans for you. God bless you. Thank you for joining us this week. And hopefully these devotions have been helpful as you grow closer to God, especially in your prayer life. God bless.